Hello everybody, ScotsThinker here, and I just wanted to say that the recent Matt Reeves directed Batman movie with Robert Pattinson in the titular role is awesome. A lot of people have been hyping up this movie as the best Batman movie since The Dark Knight. Is it as grand and epic as Christopher Nolan's The Dark Knight? I don't think so. There's a few things about this film where you can see the few chinks in the armor, and this film as a whole doesn't quite hold the thematic weight that The Dark Knight does. However, this film does make up for that with a very atmospheric outlook on Gotham City that hasn't been fully achieved in previous movies to some extent. And the film does an excellent job at gravitating the aura of fear that Batman is able to give to his criminals, whilst also discussing the thematic importance that fear is not enough to convict the criminals. You've got to have genuine hope for the people trying to do good as well. The film offers a very investing mystery, with Batman being pitted against the Riddler in his greatest film debut since, well, Batman Forever with Jim Carrey. The Riddler himself is quite an investing villain. Perhaps he's not quite Heath Ledger's Joker, but hey, he wasn't really the Joker to begin with. The Riddler is a very investing villain in his motivations and how he manages to challenge the Batman with his intellect. Showing Batman as a detective has been largely overlooked. After all, the original comics were called the Batman Detective Comics, and people do hype up Batman as the world's greatest detective. So I think it's about time we had a film which had Batman prominently solving mysteries. And I like how the Riddler turns out to be somewhat of an average Joe, but a very psychotically intimidating average Joe. There's another villain, the Penguin, who makes an appearance in this film, and he's also quite a good villain there. Well, how do you define good villain? The villains prove themselves to be worthy adversaries of the Batman. Speaking of the Batman, Robert Pattinson seems to have... Speaking of Batman, Robert Pattinson seems to fit the Batman role quite well. Not only does he look the part whenever he puts the suit on, surprisingly enough, but he does act the part as Batman. Even though the quality of his acting wavered a bit when he was Bruce Wayne, as it were, I think it was almost pitch perfect as Batman. And even though I heard he's quite difficult to handle on set, I'm glad Robert Pattinson is finally being taken seriously with big Hollywood roles. I've noticed that Batman, Andy Serkis's Alfred, the Penguin, and the Riddler are all roles that have been casted by people you wouldn't always expect to suit those roles, yet they fit in those roles quite well. They all take a similar approach to Christopher Nolan, where the characters are somewhat different from the source material, but fundamentally their characteristics are the same, despite a few changes in personality and some aesthetic details, so on and so forth. They're still the characters we know them to be. The film is deeply grounded in reality, with Batman's powers being more grounded than usual, even to the point where he has to... The film, for the most part, is surprisingly grounded in reality, with a few features that feel quite retro and somewhat grounded, and would make sense for depicting a Batman who is barely 2 years into his career and is still quite young. The most elaborate that his gadgets get are these contact lenses that have cameras in them. That's quite cool. Fight scenes are engaging, and the film is not afraid to depict Batman and Catwoman getting hurt during battle. It adds to the grounded reality and makes the characters more relatable. Catwoman shows up here, and if you ask me, I think she's a better Catwoman than Anne Hathaway. And the reason that this Catwoman is great is because of how empathetic she is. And the reason this Catwoman is so great in this movie comes from how relatable she can be in her sense of tragedy, the circumstance she's in. And the film focuses more on Catwoman finding virtue through her growing relationship with Batman, rather than just straight up empowerment that a lot of Hollywood movies have been buying into recently. It's quite refreshing to see characters seek virtue rather than empowerment. The film is very atmospheric and at times extremely gothic in its aesthetics, arguably to the point of being overtly religious at times. This could perhaps delve deeper into the theme that all the characters fighting for good recognize that they can't achieve this hope unless they have this higher hope to aim for. If there is no hope, then you might as well leave Gotham City to its own devices, and yet Batman and the others learn to find hope, and that hope affects others in positive ways. This might probably be further beaten down by the fact that Ave Maria plays constantly throughout the film, even at one point being sung by the villain Riddler himself. Speaking of the music, Michael has done an excellent job with this score, and he's given us another classic, recognizable Batman theme. It's one of those themes that's so simple yet so effective. It starts off low and builds up with a grand orchestra. Truly elevating scene that further showcases the gravitas of Batman as a hero, and as a threat to criminals. All that further supported by the footsteps that Batman makes, and his sheer brutality adds to the power of the score. For all that this film has managed to achieve well, there are still some fundamental flaws. As mentioned before, Robert Pattinson doesn't always do that well as Bruce Wayne. There's at least 3 or 2 or so scenes that rely on Deus Ex convenience. Convenience ex machina. There's a cameo by a certain laughing criminal. Who that laughing criminal? Who is that laughing criminal in Batman? Who's that laughing criminal? Who is he? Oh man, that laughing criminal. Don't tell me. Who is that laughing criminal? Perhaps that cameo could have been reserved for after the credits. As a matter of fact, another main weakness of this film is that the film feels long. It's strange, whenever I watch The Lord of the Rings Extended Edition, despite that being 3 to 4 hours long, it doesn't feel like it's dragging on for the most part. I'm engaged with it, but with this Batman movie, I felt like it was dragging on a bit. I don't know which scenes I would have cut out. I understand that every single scene plays a part in character building and talking about the themes and building up the mystery. I don't know what I would have done to fix it, but it needed to be trimmed down somehow. Maybe there could have been a theatrical cut and an extended cut. That would be cool. But these weaknesses don't necessarily drag the film down by any means. Overall, this is a good quality Batman movie worthy of a 10 out of 12. I recommend seeing it. Scott Meyer signing out.